Hi, I'm Helen, a 35-year-old woman who thrives on organization and structure. I work as an auditor for a prominent firm, and my meticulous nature, especially when it comes to managing receipts and staying on top of taxes, often gets teased by my friends. But I believe it's these little routines that keep my life running smoothly. My relationship with my husband, Scott, began at a party hosted by our mutual friend, Brenda. I remember that evening clearly. I was enjoying a glass of wine, chatting with old college friends, when Scott walked in. A bit older than me, he carried himself with confidence and flashed a smile that was hard to ignore. At the time, he was a manager at a food sales company. With a casual approach, he asked, "Hey, I'm Scott. Mind if I join you?" Holding a beer and meeting my eyes, I introduced myself. "Sure, I'm Helen. Nice to meet you." Our conversation flowed effortlessly as we discovered a shared love for hiking and a mutual appreciation for classic rock. A few months into our relationship, Scott invited me to a barbecue at his sister Margaret's house. It was my first time meeting his family, and I was understandably a little nervous. But Margaret greeted us warmly, and her 4 kids, though full of energy and a bit unruly, made the evening memorable. As toys flew and kids darted around, I introduced myself. "Nice to meet you all." Despite the chaos, Scott and I enjoyed the evening, and over time, we became closer. A few weeks later, while hiking in a scenic valley, Scott proposed. It was a simple and heartfelt gesture, and it was everything I could have hoped for. Our wedding, while beautiful, had its moments of chaos when Margaret's kids, once again, added some unpredictability to the day. Scott, ever the optimist, found their antics amusing, but I had to work hard to keep my irritation in check, not wanting to let anything overshadow the joy of the occasion. After we were married, Scott and I decided to buy our first home, moving on from our rented apartment. One evening, as we discussed finances and our future, Scott surprised me by offering to buy me a new car to replace my aging one. I was taken aback, but thrilled. It was an unexpected gesture that made me feel loved and supported. "It's about time you had something reliable," he said with a smile, clearly excited for this new chapter in our lives. We began our house hunt right away, and after a few weeks, found a beautiful home. Though it was a bit pricey, we both agreed it was perfect for us. The move was chaotic, but I was eager to settle into our new space. I spent hours carefully selecting stylish furniture and appliances to make it our own. Then, on a Saturday, Scott surprised me with a sleek, shiny new car. I hugged him tightly, overwhelmed with joy. "Scott, this is amazing." "Thank you," I said. He smiled and replied, "You're welcome, Helen. You deserve it." At first, everything seemed perfect. We both enjoyed our jobs, and coming home to our cozy, well-decorated house felt like a dream. But as time passed, little things began to annoy me. Scott's relaxed attitude, which I had once found endearing, started to wear on me, especially when it came to household responsibilities. "Scott, could you help with the dishes tonight?" I asked one evening after dinner. He looked at me with tired eyes and sighed. "I had a long day. Can we just do them tomorrow?" My frustration bubbled up. "Scott, we can't keep putting things off. I'm tired too, but we need to keep the house in order," I insisted. After a moment of hesitation, he reluctantly got up from the couch. A few months into our marriage, my anxiety started to grow. I was having trouble getting pregnant, and the pressure was starting to wear on me. My doctor reassured me to be patient and that it would happen when the time was right. But that didn't ease my worries. On top of that, Scott's sister, Margaret, who lived in the neighboring state, seemed to be visiting us constantly. It felt like she was here more than she was at home. Each time she arrived, it was an onslaught of complaints about her marriage. "Helen, you won't believe what Kevin did this time," she'd start, rolling her eyes with dramatic flair. I tried once to steer the conversation elsewhere. "Margaret, can we talk about something else for a change?" But she waved it off. "Oh, come on, you're the only one who gets it," she'd say, completely oblivious to my discomfort. Her kids were just as exhausting. The moment they stepped through our door, our home was transformed into a circus. They ran around, fought, threw food, and screamed at the top of their lungs. All I wanted was some peace after a long week, but it seemed impossible. "Guys, can you please calm down?" I asked, struggling to keep my composure. Margaret snapped back. "Why are you always so uptight, Helen?" "They're making a mess, Margaret. I just cleaned." I shot back, my patience wearing thin. That's when she hit me with a low blow. Well, maybe if you had your own kids, you'd understand. Her words cut deep, especially given my struggles with fertility. It felt like a punch to the gut, and to my disbelief, Scott didn't step in to defend me. Scott, are you really going to let her talk to me like that? I asked, my voice trembling with hurt and anger. Helen, calm down. You're making a big deal out of nothing, he said, siding with her once again. A big deal out of nothing. She just insulted me in my own home. I shouted, tears welling up in my eyes. I was exhausted from being undermined and unappreciated in my own space. Living with constant disrespect, and with Scott always taking his sister's side, was wearing me down. Something needed to change, and fast. One Saturday, Margaret showed up unannounced, her 4 kids in tow. Helen, I need a break from parenting. I'm going shopping, she declared, dropping her kids off without waiting for my response. The irony of her calling it a break from parenting made me laugh bitterly. Her visits always turned our home into a zoo. Fine, Margaret, but make it quick, I said, the stress already creeping in. Thanks, Helen, you're a lifesaver, she chirped, grabbing her purse and heading out the door before I could protest. And so there I was trying to cook dinner in the chaos. Cooking is something I take seriously. It's a process that requires precision and focus, but with the kids running wild, it felt impossible. Guys, can you please keep it down? I called out from the kitchen, hoping for just a moment of peace. But of course, they ignored me. Then a loud crash echoed through the house. My stomach sank. I rushed into the living room to find my worst fear realized. My grandfather's antique Chinese vase lay shattered on the floor. My chest tightened with anger. What the hell happened here? I screamed, looking at the kids, who stood frozen, their guilty expressions obvious. We were just playing, one mumbled, avoiding my gaze. This vase was priceless. It belonged to my grandfather. Do you even realize what you've done? I was shaking with rage. Just then, Scott walked in, his calm demeanor completely out of place in the moment. What's going on, Helen? He asked, noticing the mess. Your niece and nephews broke my grandfather's vase. Look at this. I pointed to the shattered pieces on the floor. Calm down, Helen. It's just a vase. We can fix it, he said dismissively, brushing off my anger. Just a vase. Scott, it's not about the vase. It's about respect. Every time Margaret visits, our house turns into a disaster, and you don't seem to care. My voice cracked with frustration. Margaret walked in at that moment, bags in hand, looking annoyed. What's all this yelling about? Your kids broke my grandfather's vase, Margaret. Look, I shouted, unable to hold back anymore. At the sight of the mess, I pointed to the broken pieces of the vase, struggling to hold back the tears welling up in my eyes. Margaret, with no remorse, shot back, well, maybe you should have kept a better eye on them. Are you serious? They're your kids, Margaret. Why should I be the one babysitting them? I shot back, my hands shaking with frustration. Scott sighed, visibly irritated. You're overreacting, Helen. Just let it go. Overreacting? I'm done with this. I'm tired of being treated like I don't matter in my own home. I yelled, my voice breaking as the tears spilled over. Scott stood there, silent and distant, while Margaret smirked, as if I were the one in the wrong. Unable to stay any longer, I stormed out, overwhelmed by a mix of anger, hurt, and betrayal. Margaret's chaotic visits had been an ongoing problem, but I had no idea just how much worse things were about to get. The next morning, as Scott casually ate his toast at the kitchen table, he dropped a bombshell that made my stomach drop. Helen, I need to tell you something. Margaret's getting divorced, and she's moving in with us, with the kids, for a few months, he announced, as if he were discussing something trivial. My coffee almost slipped from my hands. Are you serious? Our house is already a mess. We can barely handle one visit, but you want to make this a permanent thing. For months, I couldn't hide the panic in my voice. Scott looked at me earnestly, as if this was the most reasonable thing in the world. She's my sister, Helen. She needs our help. You need to be more understanding. Understanding. I've been patient, Scott, but this is too much. Why can't we help her find a place nearby? I'll pay for the first month's rent, whatever it takes, I suggested, trying to stay calm and find a solution. No, she'll be better off here. You can help with the kids and keep the house in order, he said, as if it was a done deal. I'm not a babysitter, Scott. I work full-time too. I need my space and my time to unwind. I snapped, my patience fraying. Stop being so selfish, Helen. It's family. They need us, he retorted sharply. I'm not being selfish. I'm asking for a compromise. I won't let my life be turned upside down because you want to play the hero, I argued, my anger rising. Well, they're coming tomorrow evening, so you'd better get used to the idea, Scott said coldly, standing up and walking away. I was left stunned, my heart pounding in disbelief. It felt like everything was slipping through my fingers. The next morning, still fuming from our argument, I went to grab my car keys, only to find they were missing. I called Scott, trying to keep my voice steady. I took the car. It's mine, remember? I'm letting Margaret use it for the kids, he said, his tone flat and uncaring. You're giving my car to Margaret? Are you serious? I asked, the shock in my voice making it clear how stunned I was. It's not your car, Helen. I paid for it, and she needs it more than you do, he replied, as if I should be grateful for his generosity. That was the final straw. You've taken everything from me, and I'm done, I said, my voice shaking with resolve. What are you talking about? Don't be dramatic, Helen, he responded, dismissing my feelings entirely. I hung up, feeling like I was suffocating. How had everything gone so wrong? I immediately called a moving company. Hi, I need a team to move some furniture and appliances today. It's urgent. A few hours later, the movers arrived. I walked them through the house, pointing out the items to take, the beds, the sofas, the chandeliers, even the faucets in the bathroom. As they removed each piece, I felt a strange sense of relief washing over me. It was as if I was finally taking back control. Everything goes to my mom's house. Thanks for the fast work, guys, I said, handing the movers a tip. With the house now completely empty, I packed up my essentials and drove over to my mom's place. As soon as I arrived, my phone started buzzing nonstop with calls from Scott. I ignored them, feeling a strange mix of anxiety and empowerment. That evening, a loud knock echoed through the house. I opened the door to find Scott, his face red with fury. What the hell, Helen? What did you do? He demanded, storming into the living room. I took my things, Scott. You took the car, so I took what I bought, I replied calmly, trying to keep my voice steady. This is insane. You stripped the whole house bare. Where are Margaret and the kids supposed to sleep? He shouted, his anger palpable. That's your problem now, Scott. You created this mess. You deal with it, I said, folding my arms across my chest. You're a thief, Helen. You stole everything, he accused, waving his arms in frustration. I didn't steal anything. Here are the receipts, I said, pulling out a folder and showing him proof of purchase for all the furniture and appliances. He flipped through the receipts, his rage shifting into frustration. Fine, Helen. If this is how you want to play it, I'll file for divorce, Scott said bitterly. I took a deep breath and handed him a stack of papers. Already done. Here are the divorce papers. It's over. His face drained of color as he stared at the papers in disbelief. You're serious about this, aren't you? Dead serious, Scott. I deserve better than this, I said, my voice calm and firm. Without another word, he pulled out a pen from his pocket, signed the papers, and handed them back to me. Fine, Helen. Have it your way. I watched him leave, the door slamming behind him. For a moment, I stood there, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. It was finally over, and though it hurt, deep down, I knew it was the right decision. Later that night, I sat with my mom and recounted everything that had happened. She listened attentively, offering comfort with her presence. When I finished, she nodded. Helen, you've been through so much. It's time to focus on yourself and your happiness, she said, pulling me into a hug. Thanks, Mom. I just need some time to figure things out, I replied, feeling like a heavy weight had lifted from my shoulders. In the days that followed, I began to settle into a new routine. I started organizing my space at my mom's house, reflecting on my next steps. It felt like a fresh start, and for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful. I knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face it. I had taken back control of my life, and there was no going back. After the divorce, Scott and I sold the house and split the proceeds. It was time for me to find my own place. While my mom's house had been a comforting refuge, I needed a space of my own. One afternoon, as we sat in the kitchen, I scrolled through apartment listings on my laptop. Mom, I think I found the perfect place. It's a small apartment downtown, close to work, I said, showing her the pictures. She leaned over and smiled. That looks great, Helen. Have you called the realtor yet? Not yet, but I'm about to, I said, my excitement growing. I dialed the number, and after a few rings, a friendly voice answered. Hello, this is Raymond. How can I help you? Hi, Raymond. My name is Helen. I'm interested in the apartment you have listed downtown. Is it still available? I asked, crossing my fingers. Yes, it's still available. Would you like to schedule a viewing? He replied, his tone upbeat. Absolutely. How about tomorrow afternoon? I suggested, trying to keep my excitement in check. That works for me. I'll see you at 4 p.m., Raymond confirmed before we ended the call. The next day, I met Raymond downtown to view the apartment. He greeted me with a warm smile outside the building. Hi, Helen. Nice to meet you. Let me show you around, he said, shaking my hand. The apartment was small but cozy, exactly what I needed. It had a lovely kitchen, a spacious living room, and a small balcony with a decent view of the city. This place is perfect, Raymond. I'll take it, I said, feeling a wave of relief. After signing a lease and getting the keys, I started planning my move. This was a fresh start, and I was determined to make it mine. Over the next few days, I packed up at my mom's house and arranged for movers to handle the heavy lifting. On moving day, my mom stood by as the movers loaded up the truck. She gave me a tight hug, her eyes glistening with emotion, but her smile was full of pride. You're doing the right thing, Helen. I'm so proud of you, she said softly. Thanks, Mom. Here's to new beginnings, I replied, feeling a mixture of excitement and nerves about what was to come. As the last box was loaded into the truck, I realized that I was truly stepping into a new chapter of my life, and I was ready for it. Helen, this is going to be so good for you. A fresh start is exactly what you need, my mom said, pulling me into another comforting hug. Thanks, Mom. I'm really looking forward to it, I said, smiling with more confidence than I had in a long time. We drove to my new downtown apartment, and with the help of my mom and a couple of close friends, we quickly got everything unloaded and set up. As I looked around my new space, I felt a rush of accomplishment. This was it, my new beginning. That evening, to celebrate the move, I invited my mom and friends over for dinner. We ordered pizza and gathered on the floor amidst unpacked boxes, raising our glasses of soda in a makeshift toast. Cheers to Helen and her new place, my friend Brenda exclaimed. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate all your help and support, I said, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude. As the night went on, we shared laughs, stories, and I felt a freedom I hadn't experienced in years. Later, as I sat on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker, I reflected on everything I had been through. I was proud of how far I'd come, taking control of my life and making the changes I needed. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. From mutual friends, I heard that Scott had used his share of the money to buy a small apartment with Margaret and her 4 kids. He was working 3 jobs to keep up with the bills, while Margaret stayed unemployed, and their constant arguing was apparently wearing him down. Then, one day, Scott called me. I was surprised to see his name on the screen, but curiosity got the better of me, and I answered. Hello, Scott. What's up? I said, keeping my tone neutral. Helen, please just hear me out, he said, his voice filled with desperation. I know I messed up. I'm really sorry for everything. I didn't realize how hard it was for you with Margaret's kids. I couldn't help but let out a small laugh. Really, Scott? You're realizing this now, after all this time? Yeah, I know it's late, but I'm serious. I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I miss you. I miss us. Can we start over? I'll even move into your apartment and we'll make things right, he said, almost pleading. I shook my head in disbelief, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. Scott, you've got to be kidding me. You think you can just waltz back into my life like nothing happened? Helen, I'm serious. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll even work more to make it up to you, he insisted, his voice desperate. I paused for a moment, weighing his words, but I knew deep down there was nothing left between us. No, Scott, it's too late for that. We're done. I hung up the phone, feeling a strange sense of closure wash over me. I didn't need him to move back in. I had already built a life for myself, one that was all mine, and I wasn't about to let anyone disrupt it again. I took a moment to gather my thoughts before responding. Scott, it's too late for that. I've moved on. I'm building a life I love, and there's no room in it for the kind of drama you bring. I wish you the best with your situation, but I'm not interested in going back. Goodbye, Scott. With that, I ended the call, a sense of finality settling in as I turned back to the city lights. I felt a renewed sense of freedom. I was ready to move forward on my terms without looking back. Later, the phone rang again. I saw Scott's name flash on the screen and let out a sigh. I wasn't going to let this continue. I've moved on. I'm happy now, and I'm not looking to go back to that mess, I said firmly when I answered. Come on, Helen. We can make it work this time. I've changed, he insisted, a mix of desperation and hope in his voice. I felt a wave of pity for him, but also irritation. Scott, it's over. You need to focus on your own life and your family. I'm not interested in going back to that chaos. Helen, please, I'm begging you, he pleaded, his voice cracking with emotion. I shook my head, despite him not being able to see me. Scott, no, I found peace without you, and I'm not giving that up, I said, standing firm. Take care, Scott. I hope you find your way. I hung up the phone, feeling a strange mix of relief and closure. Scott's struggles were his own, but they no longer had a place in my life. I had worked too hard to get here, to let him drag me back into that chaos. Later, I met up with Brenda for coffee and shared the bizarre encounter. You won't believe who called me today, I said, rolling my eyes playfully. Who? Brenda asked, her eyebrow raised in curiosity. Scott. He begged me to take him back and let him move into my apartment. I recounted, shaking my head in disbelief. Brenda laughed, almost spitting out her coffee. Are you serious? What did you say? I told him no. Of course, I'm not going back to that mess, I replied, a smile spreading across my face. We spent the rest of the afternoon chatting and laughing, and I realized just how far I had come. I had built a new life for myself, one that was peaceful and fulfilling. I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. As I walked home later, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction and peace wash over me. I had finally closed the chapter on that turbulent part of my life and was ready to move forward with confidence and joy. The city around me seemed to echo my newfound freedom, and with each step, I felt more and more assured of the bright future ahead.